I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for joining Protect the City, especially in this rain and mess. We appreciate you coming. Thank you for coming back, those of you that have been here. I'd like to start first with our silent prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Mr. Catalan. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Can't hear it.
Huh? I know it's going to be tough to hear us at times because of the metal roof, so I want to apologize for our last meeting. I heard that on Ustream some people couldn't hear some of our discussion, so I want to remind all of us, including myself, when we're speaking, have your mic on, have that button pushed, and if you're not speaking, then turn it off. And we'll all have to be extra careful in our communicating as the rain continues. As chair of the Protect the City Committee, I'd like to announce the following. This is a public hearing. To address the committee on any item on this agenda, please fill out the speaker form to submit your information to the clerk prior to the call of the agenda item, or you won't have the opportunity to speak. Staff assistance is available if needed. Items for submission to the committee should be handed to Council Clerk Ms. Veronica Williams, seated to my left. When addressing the committee, please state your name and title for the official record. The 3-minute rule will be in effect. No debating or confrontational statements will be allowed. The front row to my left is for media only. Food and drinks are not allowed in the auditorium. And of course, please silence all phones and electronic devices. Okay. I'd like to give our committee members an opportunity to make any announcement if they'd like. I'd also like to recognize City Council Advisory Liaison, Councilman Pat Lewis. And are there any other council members here? If you would please raise your hand and identify yourself. Mr. Nakan, Mr. Carlson, anyone else? Okay. Not Nakan, yes, Andy Nakan. Okay. All right, we're going to proceed to agenda Item 4. Our first speaker today is Lafayette Parish Tax Assessor Conrad Como. And Mr. Como's agreed to give us an overview of the tax system, city and parish. And I think he's giving a somewhat different presentation than has been done in the past. I know the council has gotten an overview, but I gave him kind of the parameters, what we're looking for as far as, I guess, a more understandable view of the money and where it's collected. So if you could come forward, please.
Ed Como, is this mic on? Thank you. Conrad Como, Lafayette Parish Tax Assessor. I think you were all given a copy of the presentation that I made to the City Parish Council way back. That was a general idea, and if any of you have any questions, I'm not going to go through that presentation again unless you would want me to. But if it was a general idea of how the parish tax system works in Lafayette Parish, in that there are 3 basic ways that city parish government receives revenues. It's property taxes, sales taxes, and then use taxes. 2021 being one of those crazy years in that there may be a giant influx of federal money. But that's an anomaly. That doesn't happen very often. and state revenues to the parish. We do receive some in the form of revenue sharing. That doesn't account for a big percentage of the revenue. The lion's share of the revenue, as you may know, comes from sales taxes. And what has happened in this parish, probably in other parishes as well, is people want to point to annexations being a problem. Well, let me explain how that works in case some of you may not fully get that or have been told how that works. There's a 1-cent parish sales tax that occurs outside the city of Lafayette and the other municipalities. It's in the unincorporated areas. And when property is annexed.
Conrad, you're going to have to speak up because of the rain. Right. Thank you.
Well, let me get closer. When property is annexed into a city, that 1-cent sales tax that was going to the parish general fund goes away. So the parish loses money on that aspect. The municipalities, or the municipality that annexes, then imposes its sales tax. So if the city of Lafayette annexes, there's a 2-cent sales tax that goes on the books for that locale. Well, that's just one of the impact. Little known is the impact on property taxes. There are 2 general fund millages. One is called the Parish General Alimony, and the other one is referred to as the exempted municipalities. So what happens is, when a property is in the unincorporated area, they pay 3.25 mills. When it gets annexed, that same property's general fund millage gets cut in half. It doesn't sound like a lot. The impact on parish government, and I know we're here to talk about the impact on city, but you'll see where this all goes. The impact on parish government general fund revenues today, this past year, because of annexations, and I looked at it only since the beginning of consolidation, not that that has any relevance, but just I was asked that question. The impact is $500,000 a year less than they would have received, the parish would have received had it not been annexed. $500,000. Wow. The general fund in the parish is less than $50,000. $500,000 is a big amount of money to them. And that's just parish property taxes. That doesn't include the sales tax that's lost. So where does that all take us? Well, in consolidation, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at or were given the draft report by the transition committee that was appointed during the Robideau administration to look at all of parish and city operations. I want to read something to you on the first page. The committee overwhelmingly felt that the budget process supersedes all the items classified as immediate, short-term, and long-term. More specifically, is the allocation method. What is that? I don't know how much studying y'all have done on the allocation method and methods, but I'm sure we'll hear more from Lori on that a little bit later. And that is the percentage of the expenses that are going to be paid by the city and by the parish. There are 25 allocation tables. Now, when parish government was initially set up, there were fewer tables, and these allocations were determined by a company that was hired to come in and study that and come up with the amounts to be paid by each entity. Interestingly, those allocations under the Robideau administration were based on ability to pay. Ability to pay. That's critical. Why? Because of what I've just told you about the sales tax and property tax implications of annexations. If your revenue stream is going down or not increasing at a rate that it should, then you're going to have less money than the city of Lafayette. Which means if it's based on the ability to pay, and I have a lot of money, and you don't have a lot of money, or you don't have a lot of money, then I am going to be picking up the tab for you, which is what was occurring. Now, under the prior administration, Durrell administration, the allocation tables were different. Under the Como administration, the allocation tables were different. Under this administration, the allocation tables are different. That's what needs to be worked on and studied to determine, to truly determine if the city is picking up the tab for the parish in some regard. I was asked some general questions about, well, who's paying the tab on parish property taxes? I'm going to give you a spreadsheet that shows 7 millages. The first two are general fund millages, and it's a breakdown of where those funds are coming from in the parish, whether it's coming from the taxpayers in Dusson, Broussard, Carencro, Lafayette, Scott, unincorporated area, and of course the city of Lafayette. I'll give it to Pat if you want it that way? Okay. All right. I only included millages that, oh, I see one of them slipped in there by mistake. Wasn't supposed to be in there. That second to last one that says Tesh Vermillion shouldn't have been on this list, but it is, so there it is. I showed you the millages that were not dedicated to specific things, such as the airport millage, the library millage, LEDA, my millage, the sheriff's millage, school board. I didn't include all those others. These are the funds that, except for the Tesh Vermillion, have something to do with public works and other departments that are more generalized and not specifically fund driven like those others I mentioned. I always get the question of, well, how much are we paying in Broussard, or how much are we paying in Youngsville, or how much, whatever, for drainage? Well, if you look down, third from the bottom is the drainage district. Carencro, 10,000. Broussard, 747,000. Carencro, 215. City of Lafayette, 4.8 million. Scott, 224,000. Youngsville, 446. And you can see the rest. So, why do I show you this? Because people in municipalities always say, how much are we paying towards X, and why aren't we getting services? This paradigm has been going on long before I was even on the parish council, starting in 1984. The funds that are generated for these millages are almost all spent in the unincorporated area. Almost all of those funds are spent in the unincorporated area. Now you look at this and you say, well, drainage, wow, $7.8 million. We must be doing a lot of projects. Well, don't forget, that also has to pay for the administrative component of drainage. It has to pay for the people in drainage. It has to pay for the equipment in drainage. So at the end of the day, there's not a lot of money left from the property tax to really cover all the drainage needs. Same goes for all these other millages. So the moral of that story is the majority of property tax is paid by whom? City of Lafayette residents and taxpayers, businesses. 60 to 61% is paid by taxpayers in the city of Lafayette. And very little of that has or gets spent in the city of Lafayette, if any. But that's traditional. That's been the way that works. Well, and some people said, well, historically, what has happened? The next spreadsheet I'm going to give you will give you a clear indication of what's going on there. When you look at this spreadsheet, I went back to 1992, and the first column that is highlighted in yellow says percentage of net taxable value outside of all municipalities. In 1992, the unincorporated area taxpayers were paying about 25% of the tab. Go down that column, today it's about 17.5%. Wow.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes. In 1992, the parish unincorporated area taxpayers were paying 24.5% of the property taxes. Today, it's down to 17.6%. Or 17.5. Let's look at the far column on the right. That says net taxable value percent inside the city of Lafayette. That's a direct translation to taxes. The value and the taxes go hand in hand. So you can use those percentages interchangeably. In 1992, it was 68%. It did rise, the city of Lafayette percentage did rise up to a point of 72%. Today, it's down to 61.5% total. Now, if you look at that in conjunction with the other spreadsheet I gave you, you can pretty much figure out what's going on. And that is the area municipalities are picking up more and more of the tab of the parish taxes. But the city of Lafayette still picks up pays 61% of the taxes, property taxes. Well, if you're in the city of Lafayette, you're paying 61% for the roads, bridges, highways, and drainage in the unincorporated area. If you're in the city of Lafayette, you are paying 61% of all the money that's being spent in the unincorporated area as far as roads, bridges, drainage. That's the translation. But on top of that, you also have city millages that city taxpayers are paying. General alimony, 5.42 mills. Streets, roads, alleys, 1.29 mills. Public buildings, 1.13 mills. Then there's a recreation millage, and then you have police and fire millages on top of that. Not to mention sales taxes, etc. How do you split all this up and determine who pays for what? Well, that gets us right back where I started, and that's in those allocation tables. Another comment from the draft report. How the departments use those funds from the various commingled sources will have to be agreed upon by both councils. The allocation methods should be top of the mind for the new councils to understand the implications, and how it impacts both the city and parish moving forward. And there's a number of references to allocation tables in this draft report. As the saying goes, the devil's in the details, and how those allocation tables are addressed is the crux of the question. And that's part of the budgeting process. Now, that's all I have to impart at this point, but I'm sure there are questions, comments, or whatever.
Conrad, I know you were just seeing the report. You hadn't actually seen the, there's no final report, but the draft report. And on the first page, I'm just curious if you would share your opinion. The committee, and this was chaired by Jerry Luc LeBlanc, was chairman. Research should continue into formal modification of the charter, including more comprehensive discussions regarding deconsolidation of Lafayette city and parish governments as an option. Is that something you would ever share your opinion on?
Sure. When we were on this committee, it became evident to us, some of us on the committee, that the current setup may be an untenable setup long term for a number of reasons. Number one, a mayor president is serving two masters, the parish and the city. Sometimes there are conflicting interests in those decisions. People outside of the city want one thing, and people inside the city want another. You're being pulled in both directions. I don't know how you resolve that without splitting that office. Great. We split the councils, so if you split the main office, then that begs the question, who's in charge of the department heads? And who directs them? Is it going to be the mayor, or is it going to be the parish administrator? Well, I guess you need a parish public works director, and I guess you need a city public works director. Okay, let's follow that pyramid down. Well, then who directs the guy that's riding on that bulldozer? Is it going to be the city director, or is it going to be the parish director? It's a rabbit hole you go down. The only way to get out of that rabbit hole is to split them so that there are clear lines of who controls what and where, as well as the funding. Allocation tables, I can tell you, were an eye-opener for this committee. Jerry Luke LeBlanc and I, when we'd hear about those allocations, we'd just look at each other and go, whoa, what? The devil's in the details. And how do you equitably determine those allocation tables? All I can say is good luck. Good luck. Why? I've got a guy working out in the field. How are you going to track exactly how much time he spends in the city versus outside the city? Good luck. Unless you have a GPS on every individual working here and know exactly how much time they spend on X, good luck. That's the problem. So an allocation table, or allocation tables, I would call them a swag, a scientific wild guess. There's another word in there, but I left it out. It's a scientific wild guess. That's our best estimate as to what those percentages maybe should be or shouldn't be. And you have heard already how they have changed from one administration to another. Wow. Yeah, the only way we could see fixing this was to split them apart. That was the upshot. Because the way it is now, those allocation tables are a head scratcher. As best as we could figure. And it's to be addressed by the councils and the administration. And they have to agree on them. Again, you have conflicting interests. The parish has one set of interests and the city has another set of interests. So how do you split those tables? Tough question. Tough question. And of course, the comments from the past were, well, the only reason the parish wanted consolidation was because it was going broke. I think the impetus, and trust me, I was there, I voted as a parish council member for consolidation. The one vote out of 12 years I deeply regret. Deeply regret. And if you want to see this experiment going bad, well, guess what? We based this consolidation on what took place 50 miles down the road in Baton Rouge. We held that up and said, look, Baton Rouge has been consolidated for all these years. At that point, 1980, whatever, 1990, they had been consolidated 20 plus years. But it was the same kind of consolidation we have, not the kind of consolidation New Orleans has. New Orleans' consolidation is complete. The city of Orleans is the co-terminus with the parish of Orleans. You got one entity. In Baton Rouge, look at the experiment going bad and see what's happening and going to happen here in the future. Baton Rouge has had discussions similar to us about deconsolidating. What has happened in East Baton Rouge Parish in the last 10 to 15 years? 2 new cities that did not exist. Central and St. George. Wow. What's going to happen to East Baton Rouge Parish government and the city of Baton Rouge? You have all these people moving into these outside areas. And let's be honest, it's white flight. Let's not color it anything else. That's what it is. The handwriting is on the wall in Lafayette Parish. We're going down the same road. And we'll be talking like them probably in 20 years about deconsolidation again. So, yeah, that's what we came up with. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you solve this unless you get the other municipalities, all the municipalities to say, okay, let's all consolidate into one big city, one big parish, and then we sing Kumbaya. I don't see that happening. I think that horse left the barn a long time ago. Those municipalities are starting to thrive. Don't see it happening. Dissolution of the cities, be a tough one. So.
We have some questions for you. First, Roddy Bergeron.
Hey, Conrad, thanks for coming today. Appreciate your knowledge of all of our taxes and how they work. I've listened to your presentation before, and it's good stuff. It's good stuff to hear. First question I have, you talked about the demographic changes just now. Have you tracked that, and how has that affected City of Lafayette population over time, if that's happening, like similar to what's going on in Baton Rouge?
The population in the parish as of this past year was 245,000 roughly. The population in the city of Lafayette is 135,700 some odd. Roughly 55.36% of the population lives in the city of Lafayette. I don't have the historic numbers, but part of the problem is this, is that the area municipalities, and I'm not saying anything out of school, I think they all know this by now, have not reported to the state in the proper forms in the past few years to get a clear indication of their populations. So what happens in that case is that their population stays flat. Their population estimate stays flat. Well, we all know that's not what's really going on in Youngsville, for goodness sakes, as well as the other municipalities. They're expanding. Populations are growing. So it's difficult to give you a good answer on that as to, but as far as in the city of Lafayette, I guarantee that percentage has come down. Guarantee.
And another question, too, with regards to that. If the population continues to shift, do you believe the city of Lafayette could lose its seat of power as the parish, seat? Do you believe that's possible?
No, not as a parish seat. I don't see that. No.
Okay. Another question.
I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but...
Yeah, I'm just curious. All right, so regards with past city councils or city parish councils and mayor presidents, is there anything they could have done differently in the past to rectify that loss of tax revenue for the parish that happened?
Interestingly enough, I was reminded that when I was on the council, and I had forgotten this until a friend of mine reminded me, our council tried to pass a parish-wide sales tax back in probably the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in that time frame. A parish-wide sales tax to rectify that situation. And the way it was explained to me, although I'd forgotten, was the way it was structured was that any new annexation, the parish would continue to get their 1-cent sales tax in that area. It failed some 55, 45 or somewhere in that vicinity. Joey Durrell tried a 1-cent sales tax, and that one failed 63 maybe % against. In my opinion, one way to rectify the problem, if you don't want to do it through property taxes, would be to establish a parish-wide sales tax district that includes every part of this parish, do away with the 1-cent sales tax in the unincorporated area, and put in a half-cent or a third of a cent, whatever, for the entire parish. So that no matter if property gets annexed, you're still paying that parish property tax. That would give the parish a more stable source of revenue going forward and prevent a lot of what's been taking place in the past. That's one aspect. The other thing is this. In the millages, what took place in 1996 with the first council was pretty devastating for parish and city revenues. What happened was that was a reassessment year. And state law says that in a reassessment year, if the total assessed value in the parish goes up, you must lower your millage to bring in the same revenue as the prior year. So it's a simple equation. Your assessment times the millage equals revenue. Where if the assessment goes up, the millage has to go down to bring in the same revenue. But by a 2/3 vote of the council, now remember that was the first consolidated council, but by 2/3 vote of the council, you could raise your millage to the prior year's level to bring in additional revenue. Okay. State law goes on to say, if you don't raise that millage to the maximum before the next reassessment, you lose that maximum. They didn't raise it for 4 years. They lost that maximum. And the only way to get it back is what took place this past year. I'll get into that in a minute. So going forward, during Joey Durrell's administration, he showed the deficits in various funds. Had that council not taken that action in those 4 years, if they had rolled up that millage, there would have been no shortage in the courthouse and jail funds. So they shot themselves in the foot. The city parish council did at that point in time. And it has occurred a couple times since then where the millages weren't rolled up. Give you an example. In the last 4 years, I could have raised my millage to the maximum. I did it 1 year, and only 1 year, and then lowered it. Why? I had to raise it to preserve the maximum. Period. I didn't have much choice. Otherwise, my office would have lost that maximum. All right, let me go back to what just took place this past year. Assessments went down. When assessments go down, state law says that you can raise your millage to bring in the same revenue as the prior year. Parish Council did that on most of their millages. Some of them they didn't do it on. Which means if they didn't raise that millage, then that fund would bring in less money than it did the prior year. One of the things that I tried to caution those councils about is this. I don't know what's happening this year to assessments at this point. At this point. If they go down again, and it's considered, or if they go up a lot, either direction by a lot. Now, I don't mean just these minor tweaks here and there, but if they change a lot, and the legislative auditor deems that it is a reassessment, then those councils have lost those maximums. Ouch. Ouch. So here we go again, digging the hole deeper. And I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's happening this year. The last time this happened was 1986 through 88. 86 through 88, when they dropped 25%. Wow. That's the last time it happened. So I don't have the crystal ball to tell you what's going to happen this year. Every year that I've been in office, assessments have increased, except last year. I've been there 20 years. So those implications on those millages, or the voting on those millages, have long-term implications as to the revenues of those bodies. So, hey.
Oh, one more question before I go. Do you believe that any administration has accurately and fairly split that tax revenue up in the allocation formula? Did any administration, you believe, do it fairly and accurately? I hate to put you on the hot seat on that one. But
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, because really I haven't studied them. You know, I wasn't, part of this government. Out doing my own thing over there, and I never really looked at those allocation tables to any great depth. It's difficult to say. Maybe the first year that it was done, maybe, but then again, that's just a guess. I don't know.
We now have a question from Mark Pope.
Conrad, correct me if I'm wrong. When you purchase anything anywhere in Lafayette Parish, you are paying a clean penny to the sheriff department. Is that correct? In other words,
No.
No, it's not correct.
Only in the unincorporated area does the sheriff get any money. So his revenues have been going down as well.
So is it roughly, and this is a rough figure, the $5 million a year in sales tax? So what you're telling me is what parish government gets for their penny in the unincorporated, you pay a penny in the unincorporated parish to the sheriff. So are they both at roughly 5 million, 3.8, 4.4 million a year in sales tax?
I don't know the sales tax revenue numbers.
All right, we'll explore that.
That's not mine.
Okay, on your chart, I am a bit confused on with the two yellow columns, your vertical.
Okay.
Okay. Let me give you an example. Let's keep the example simple. Somebody owns a $100,000 house in the unincorporated parish, and somebody owns a $100,000 house in the city of Lafayette. The road and bridge millage is 4.47 mils,
Right.
brings in $9.8 million a year.
Right.
Do the people, one in the city of Lafayette, one in the unincorporated parish, are they paying the same amount for that 4.47 millage on roads and bridges?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then your figures here are more, the parish pays less because there are less residents. So if the city residents paying the same amount for the road and bridge millage at 4.7 mils, and the parish resident, they're paying the same amount because it's 4.7 mils. Their home and land is valued the same. So they're paying exactly the same amount of money. But there are fewer residents in the unincorporated parish, hence less property millage revenue.
This isn't tied to population.
Property value.
That's a stretch. It's tied to assessments, not population. What I mean by that is, the example is perfect here. Broussard and Youngsville. Broussard and Youngsville. Look at the percentage on the long spreadsheet paid within Broussard, 9.31% of the parish property taxes. Look at Youngsville, 5.56%. But wait, the populations are similar. It's got nothing to do with population. It's got to do with assessed value. Why? Broussard annexed all up and down the thruway. Why? They wanted the sales tax revenue. Youngsville, on the other hand, under prior administrations, was annexing residential areas. So that, yeah, the population grew, but their parish property taxes didn't expand that much compared to Broussard, because Broussard got all that industrial area. Big tax dollars there. So it's not really tied to population. There's some vague relationship, but not really tied.
And I may call with a couple of questions. We have a finance subcommittee and to fully understand that. But here, because Conrad has told us mostly about property millages, the highest property, and correct me if I'm wrong, the highest property millage anywhere in Lafayette Parish is paid by the Downtown Development Authority, 12.75 mils. And their assessed property value is, I don't recall, Conrad, about $200 million, roughly. They bring in, with that millage, 12.75 mils, they bring in $450,000 a year because their assessed property value is less. A lot of buildings in downtown Lafayette are exempt from paying a property millage.
The problem that DDA has, and I've been telling them this over the years, is that it's such a small district, such a small area, that anything that takes place in that district can have a dramatic effect on them. What do I mean? Banks, example. AT&T, example. Those two are biggies. When the banks pull out of DDA, a downtown area, the bank stocks take a dive. The assets take a dive. When AT&T had their center here and technology has replaced that room full of computers with a server this big, well, they no longer need that building. They no longer needed all that equipment. Takes a dive. That's in the DDA. Their assessed value is only $30 million. I mean, you take $1 million out and all of a sudden, you got 1/30 of their tax base gone. So that's, their millage started out at 10 mils. This year, it could have been over 14 mils. They chose not to go that high, but that's what's happening to DDA. Is some of those. But yeah, and then I hear people say, well, you have all these people, moving in, and there's residential things. That doesn't contribute nearly what a bank stock does, or bank assets, or AT&T. There's no comparison. So they've taken a hit, and that's, yes. people in DDA pay the highest property taxes in the parish.
Let me, one final observation that kind of fits in with what you're talking about. If you folks remember Don Bakke, and he talked about, one of the things he said was, what really gets my goat about parish residents and property millages, they voted down their property millage for fire protection. And there was money moved from another millage to go toward that. So just an observation, people in the unincorporated parish do not pay a Parks and Recreation property millage, and they do not pay a fire protection property millage. In the city of Lafayette, you do pay those two property millages.
That's correct. That is correct.
Thank you.
We have a question from Bill Leindecker.
Okay.
I just want to know if you agree with this statement. Using population as a measure for cost allocation is an objective measure, where using the ability to pay is a subjective measure.
Well, I would agree with that statement, but is it fair? And is it equitable? Yeah, you can base it on population. You can base it on assessed value. You can base it on whatever you want to base it, objective numbers. I mean, non-subjective numbers. But is it fair? I don't know. I don't know. So I say it's a deep question. The allocation percentages is not a simple thing that you can just say, okay, let's base it on population. Well, the problem we have is that the city of Lafayette is the economic engine for this parish. What do I mean by that? Is there a science museum in any other municipality in this parish? No. Is there an auditorium in any other municipality in this parish? No. Are there art galleries? And you can go on and on and on. Lafayette, the city of Lafayette, is what generated the interest in this community, in this area, and people coming here and wanting to stay here, the quality of life issues. So there is the crux of the problem. If you want to base it solely on population, well then let's put everything on an equal footing. You get rid of all the quality of life stuff. And then let's look at it. It's not a simple answer because of all the other amenities that the city of Lafayette offers that you can't get anywhere else, or you don't get anywhere else in the parish. Or you might get a smidgen here, a smidgen there, but for the most part, no. So you need additional funds to fuel that engine, or you just cut them out, one of the two. Well, if you cut them out, which is what I see happening, then what? We'll become like any other of the 10,000 cities between here and Canada that have no economic engine. Nobody wants to live there. I mean, you see it, these cities dying all across this state. Well, guess what? It's happening all up and down the country. If you don't have those quality of life issues, these proficients and CGI, et cetera, they're not going to be here in 10 years. I say, wait, we're going someplace where people have a quality of life. So it's a complex question of how you cut that allocation in. And those are the kinds of things somebody's got to fund or not. So you just can't say base it on population. Yeah, that would be nice and sweet if we could just, boom, do it that way. But there's more to the discussion, I think, than just that, just population.
We have a question from Joseph Catalan.
Mr. Como, concerning the allocation method, in your opinion, do you think the allocation method can ever become sustainable? We've changed through the years, different administrations.
Let me tell you, this is another reason why consolidation was a bad idea. As long as the head person, city parish president, and the councils can shift money from the city to the parish fluidly, what is the impetus for any of them to ever get rid of consolidated government? None. None. Why? You saw that under the Robodeau administration. Ability to pay. Wow. Let's not address the underlying problem here, which is funding. No, let's run and hide from that. And I'm not picking on Joe Robodeau. I'm telling you, everyone since this fiasco started in 1996 has not had to address the tough question of revenue for the parish government. Not one. Joey Durrell tried with that 1 cent sales tax. He tried. As long as they can hide, I'm not pointing a finger at this administration, that's the way it's set up. It's politics. Let's talk about that now. That's the problem here. Politically, they don't have to. That person and the councils don't have to address the hard question about funding. Kevin Knockhands tried with some of these millages, didn't go anywhere because not everybody was on board. But until that hard question gets pushed, not sustainable. No, because you can shift those monies. And as a council, you might never know where the shifting takes place. I learned under the best. Walter Como was a master. He was one of the best politicians around. And I learned well the power of that administration position and what they can and can't do. So that's the bottom line. Until those councils get pushed to that point, who's going to address it? You just change the allocation a little bit here and there, and, well, we'll make ends meet. Telling it the way it is, and that's the way it's taking place.
Any other questions? Mr. Lewis, do you have any questions?
You could go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Como, thank you for all the insights. Very, very good insight, information. We were talking, Mr. Pope talked about the downtown, about DDA paying the highest tax rate. And I agree with that. And just like you said about when you first started talking about there are 3 taxes, use tax, sales tax, and property tax. And that's one of the issues with downtown when all the banks started leaving, because there was a lot of use tax that went out, because the banks have a lot of use tax in AT&T and what have you. So again, what I like to encourage the committee that I would like to bring the sales tax department to come and speak with us, and that way we have a lot more insight about how sales tax are derived and how the money is divided once they collect. Because the sales tax are the collectors of not the sales tax, the school board. So I'd like the school board to come and speak to us, because they are the collectors of sales tax, and I think that would be very interesting. So again, I do not want you guys to confuse yourself with sales tax and property tax. And I heard someone say that the unincorporated areas pay property tax and pay another tax. I can't remember what they said, but you have to remember that the unincorporated areas do not pay city tax. If you live in the city, you have two tax bills at the end of the year, parish tax and you have a city tax. If you live in Cancun, all these other municipalities, that's the same thing. Ms. Como, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you live in unincorporated areas, there's no city tax that's collected in the sales tax in the unincorporated areas. And that's basically all I want you guys to know, that don't get confused about millage and property tax. There's a sales tax that we need to get clarifications on. Thank you.
The only exception to that is Broussard. The city of Broussard collects no property tax. They made a deal with the voters a number of years ago that if they would pass this sales tax, then they would stop collecting the property tax. They still have the ability to levy a property tax. They choose not to. So there's an example where the municipality started out at 5 mills each that they could impose, and because Broussard hasn't imposed it, that millage has gone down to somewhere in the range of 3 mills now that they could impose, but they choose not to.
Conrad, thank you for your time today. We may call upon your expertise as we move along. I don't know if it'd be in person or maybe some questions, but I want to thank you so much for your time. And
sure.
I learned a lot today. We've gotten a lot of materials, and I think the committee hasn't had the opportunity to see that report. That I want to thank you for giving me more information about knowing what to ask, but this has been invaluable. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And you're welcome to stay if you'd like. We're going to have Miss Lori Toops is next. I need to stand just for a minute. I don't know if you guys need to just, it's my back. Oh, boy. I don't know how y'all do it, Pat, when you have 6-hour meetings. Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the water helps, huh? Yeah. It's like Johnny Carson. Okay. I'd like to welcome Ms. Lori Toops, our Chief Financial Officer for the City Parish Consolidated Government. And I'm glad you were here with us. Thank you for spending so much time with us, but I'm hoping that helped to hear the first presentation.
Actually, it did, and there's a couple of things in there I'd like to talk about. I'm not sure if our assessor knows some of the changes we've made over the years, and so I think that's kind of important, where some of the things he said aren't quite the same today as what it was maybe in 2010. For example, while he said that on the drainage millage that all that money was spent in the unincorporated areas, he's correct when it comes to capital, but he's not correct when it comes to O&M. Used to be correct, but now the city has no drainage department. The city doesn't pay any drainage employees. All of the drainage employees are paid from this parish-wide millage. And so, granted, there's probably more drainage work going on outside. I'm not really sure if someone's going to measure that, but at least the city taxpayers are getting drainage work with the amount of money they spend for that they pay in that drainage millage. The same is true for the road and bridge millage, although the city taxpayers do pay about $2 million in road and bridge taxes. There's about 8 or 9 million collected parish-wide, another 2 million in the city, and then there's about 1.5 million we get from the state. All that goes into that fund. All of the employees for road and bridges are paid from that fund. None of them are paid from the city general fund anymore, but they used to be. So over the years since I've been here, there's been a lot of changes in the rating, the way the rating agencies rate governments. And as you can imagine, the city of Lafayette has a lot more bonds outstanding. The parish hardly has any compared to the city. And the city's bond rating is very important. We go out almost annually for new bonds, and that's how we keep up our roads and bridges in the city. And it's important that we maintain a strong bond rating. So over the years, as we react to changes in the way the rating agencies rate governments, we've made a lot of changes in the way we handle our general fund. And one of the things we've done is try to eliminate and reduce the amount of things that we allocate in that city parish allocation. Sometimes I'm amazed at how we get into these deep, passionate conversations about the city parish allocation, because it's such a major budgetary expense of this government, right? Well, at the end of the day, it's less than 5% of the adopted budget. What we are allocating in that city parish allocation table is less than 5% of the consolidated government's budget. When you look at the budget after we look at the capital projects that we have, unfinished capital projects, it's less than 3% of the consolidated government's budget. So we can spend months and months talking about the city parish allocation. We're talking about less than 3% of the entire budget. We're not allocating the whole public works department anymore like we used to. We're not allocating the functions of public safety. That's all done in the city. So I think it's important to remember, what are we allocating? We're not allocating $300 million. We're allocating less than 5% of the original adopted budget. But allocations are important. Why do we even have allocations? Allocations is the way we share cost between the city and the parish, because it's not fair for one unit of government to pay the whole thing and the other one just to get off without paying anything. It's an accounting method. I'm not a politician. I'm not an elected official. I don't want to be. They have a really tough job. But I'm a CPA. I have to follow generally accepted accounting principles. I have to make sure that our financial statements are presented in accordance with governmental accounting standards. And so there's a lot of things that we have to look at that way. And there are methods that we can do cost allocations. I don't choose a political direction. My boss will say, hey, I'll sit down with the mayor, usually at the beginning of a term, and he'll tell me how he sees the allocations. And so I just try to make sure that the allocations fit within some sort of measurement that we can support. But at the end of the day, it is approved by the city parish council, and now the city council and the parish council in the budgetary process. Whenever there's a change in allocation method, I highlight that during my budgetary presentation to the council. It's printed in the book. Sometimes if it's major, I will mention it in my budget message, but whether it's a major change or a minor change, I will present it to the council during the budget process. So I just kind of wanted to make sure you realize what we're allocating, how much it is. It's such a small percentage of our budget. Consolidated government is so much bigger than the city parish allocation table. It's just, it's a minor thing. What are we allocating now? So we took the major things that that don't need to be allocated. If you can direct charge it. You know, when I came here, the city general fund was paying for all the street lights in the parish. Well, you know, I got an inventory of streetlights, and I said, we're not paying for that anymore. I know where that street light is located. It shouldn't be in an allocation table. It could be direct charged, and so we split that out and started charging the parish that had to pay for their own. But there are some things like my time, like V's time. You can ask us to keep a log of how we spend our time, but there's going to be times where I'm going to spend with an issue with our payroll system. It's not related to the city, it's not related to the parish, it's related to everybody's payroll. So why do you allocate costs? You allocate costs for those reasons when it can't be directly charged. So one of the questions that Mr. Leindecker asked about allocating by population and why do allocations changed. When I was fairly new here and Mr. Durrell wanted to change the allocations, he just wanted everything based on population. So what I would do is I'd go to the cost consultants and I'll say, okay, Mayor-President wants everything by population, so they'll go through the list. And when they got to the Finance Department, the cost consultant said, population is by no means a reasonable method to allocate the Finance Department. The Finance Department is super busy with city work because the city's got all the money to spend, and with LUS, because that's half the budget right there. So over half of finance's work is just with LUS, not to mention police, fire, all of those divisions, they have employees working around the clock. So payroll for those departments are a lot more detailed and complicated than payroll for the library, for drainage, the health unit. Those guys aren't working around the clock. So more of our money and time is spent, so they did not agree on allocating that by population. So they said no, and we did it based on budgeted funds or something like that. But population might be totally reasonable for the mayor's time or the mayor-president's time, and they did agree to those measures. Population is not acceptable for traffic signals because you can count those. So why would you use population for that? So that's why there are different methods. At the end of the day, the mayor-president recommends that in his proposed budget, and it has to be approved by the council. So another question was, what was the firm paid, and asked about how the firm performs the calculations. Mayor-President Robideau changed one of the calculations to undedicated tax revenue. That's the one that our assessor refers to as ability to pay. You will not see ability to pay on that allocation table. It's simply not there. But it is based on undedicated tax revenue. And that was a method it was a measurable method. You can measure it. And the cost consulting company said that was acceptable. So what Mr. Robideau did at that time, he sat down with me. He said, well, okay, what money do we have available to pay for this expense for the IS&T department? Well, I couldn't use drainage money to pay for IS&T. I couldn't use police and fire salaries to pay for IS&T. So what do I use? The money that's left over, the undedicated money that's not dedicated to another purpose, is what I could use for IS&T. So when I look at that, that's kind of how I look at my IS&T budget at home. My IS&T budget at home is a lot bigger than my daughter's. My daughter's a school teacher in Jefferson Parish, and she has a child that she tends to and takes care of, going to Catholic school. So her IS&T budget's a lot smaller than mine. Her income's smaller, so therefore she's spending a lot less. The city parish is kind of like that. By using the undedicated tax revenue, that's kind of what you get. The city's picking up more than the parish, but at the end of the day, this is kind of what I was trying to advise you on at the last meeting, was look at the percentages, 80-20. Well, that's not fair. The city's paying 80% of the IS&T department. Try not to concentrate on that. Look down the column of the city-parish allocation and ask yourself, when you're looking at it, is it reasonable for a city with a utilities department of over $300 million and a city government with fire and police and transit to spend that much on IS&T? Look at the dollar amount, not the percentage. And if that's reasonable, the reason why you're using an allocation method is because you can't get to the exact charge. So you have to ask yourself if it's reasonable. It's not going to be exact, because if you had the exact measure, you would use it. But you're using an allocation method to get somewhere in the area. It's not going to be exact or perfect, but if that number is reasonable, then the 80-20 might not be bad. It's kind of like a roommate. If you have a roommate that's sleeping on the sofa and they're paying 20% of the rent, are you paying 80% of their living expenses, or are you saving 20% of the rent? The city's not necessarily losing. Maybe there is something there that you think is unfair and unrealistic, but at the end of the day, when it's only 4% of the entire budget, is it really that material? And so you have to kind of look at it that way. If one person benefits, the city benefits from the parish-wide drainage millage, but hey, I pay that drainage tax when I pay my property tax bill, and I live in the city, and moving into another house in the city at the end of the week. But I'm paying that parish-wide tax, and I get to benefit from it. So there's really nothing wrong with that. Another thing that the cost consultants do. So Mr. Robideau wanted to use this allocation of undedicated tax revenue. I would have ran off and used 1 year of undedicated tax revenue, calculated the city parish allocation, and moved on to the next page in the budget book. But we hand this over to the cost consultants, and they develop a methodology of using that information. They wouldn't allow us to use just 1 year of revenue calculations because we can skew that information. Maybe the city had a large audit and had to return a lot of sales taxes that year. So it made the city's revenue lower or higher. If, you know, the opposite happened and the parish had a large audit and had reduced revenues. So that would bump the burden up on the city. So they, in their calculations, they prepare the spreadsheets that we use. They used several years to sort of average it out and smooth it out. So if you have 1 year with a large variation, can't skew the calculation. So this is something I wouldn't have thought to do. This is something the cost professionals tell us, well, if this is the measure you use, this is how you implement the formula. So that's the kind of work they do. They'll tell us if it's an acceptable method, and then they'll tell us how to use it. But they're not going to come in and decide the method for the city parish allocation. They do a lot of other allocations for us. For federal grants, and they have to follow the Code of Federal Regulations, and they also do some allocations where they have to follow the Fair Competition Act for LUS and fiber departments. The cost for those for the city parish allocation is $6,000, but the last time we paid that was the last time the allocation had a major change, and that was in 2016. We budget it each year just in case there is a major change planned. For example, I knew that the council was interested in having some presentations and having the cost consultants possibly travel. So they gave me a proposed budget of $12,000 for last year. We didn't spend a penny of it. With COVID, they didn't travel and we didn't change the allocation, so I wasn't going to pay them to do, not to do that. What we do is update the calculations internally, and the budget manager does that in the budget department. And we just keep the spreadsheets that they gave us in 2016, and we just keep updating those. We won't pay them again for the city parish allocation unless there's a major change. If we do change one allocation method, let's say we change the finance department to population is already used elsewhere, we can just repeat the way that is handled without paying them another $6,000. If it's something new, we probably would reach out and have to go ahead and consult with them on that year and pay them that fee. The other charges, just full disclosure, we have the federal cost allocation is about $15,000, and the fiber allocation is about $13,000. Those two we do have to do every year, but for the city parish, when it's not changing, we don't want to just contract with them to not, to do something that we can do in-house based on the previous job. I did forward the selected history. You'll note that some of the history on that in Public Works, because of the changes that we made, we do go back and bill the parish for some things in Public Works. But look at the dollar amount, because when you look at the allocation chart and you see city parish allocation, and it's, I don't know, it might be 60-40, but you got to wonder why. Remember, look at the dollar amounts, because it's not going to be the entire Public Works Department. It's going to be a small portion of city engineers that happen to be working on parish projects. So the dollar amounts then become a lot smaller where it doesn't include the public works employees working on bridges and roads and drainage because they're all paid under a separate millage. So that's another reason why it's important not to just look at the percent, look at the dollar amount, because you're going to see public works roads automatically think, oh, all of roads is being allocated. No, it's not. A small portion is being allocated. All of finance is, but all of public works is not. So that's another reason to scoot over on that chart and look at the dollar amounts. And you may need, it's all on the chart, but I realize it could be a little intimidating. We have the little department codes on there. So, you know, you may need some direction in where do you go, how do you look up that actual division to see that it's the engineers or that it's the sign mechanics. But it won't be the whole department. And like I said, it's all on that chart, but it might take some help and assistance in reading that.
Ms. Tubes, if I may, just while you're on that point, I don't want to get you off track, but I've had some issues trying to make sense of some of this because we'll get, you know, like one chart that shows percentages or the allocation tables that you sent us, and I appreciate the information, but then we have to go to the big budget, the 400-page document, you know, as you put it, and it seems like it's been very difficult to get kind of just a comprehensive report on how much the money is and the percentage and the allocation. Like you were talking a minute ago about the administrative cost, and I see on the last few years it's been 82%, 81%, whatever, paid by the city. It's 79% this year. And even if it's only 3% of the budget, it would be helpful if we could have some kind of a, like if we're reading a book, we wouldn't have to go to all these different tables, but just to have access to that information. Am I making sense? Like I'm hearing you talk, and then I have to think, wait, I saw this here, I saw that there.
It is not an easy concept to put together. It is not. I spent 6 months of my life just figuring out what was happening before I really was able to move into, is this, you know, how do we correct this? How do we make it better? Not really correct it because it wasn't wrong, but there was maybe ways to make it better. So it is a very complex concept. Right. It's a complex calculation. Those pages in the budget book are the summary. I mean, that's everything. You can take the division on those pages, flip to that division in the budget book to see all the details. But there is nothing that you can look at one sheet that just shows it all to you.
But like you were sharing with us just now, the 3% of the budget is all that's really cost allocated. So it'd be nice to get that information just in a summary from you, if we may, and where you said, you know, from your office, only 3% of the budget, is there a cost allocation, and this is how much it is. And I guess that would lead us to believe that the rest of the budget, the parish pays, they could pay their bills, and the city pays its bills without worrying about,
and that's all on those pages. That's what I looked at to figure out, well, how much are we actually
It's in the 400 pages. It's in
it's on those 3 pages.
The 3 pages that you sent. With the cost allocations?
Yeah.
But we don't see what that's based on. We see, I know there's codes, there's like 25 codes or something, but we're not seeing all the information. What you sent us by email that shows.
Yeah, that's it.
Did everybody, am I the only one that's questioning how to make sense of, I'm just, it's probably me, I'm not an accountant.
No, and that's understandable. I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA, and I had to really walk through this. I became friends with the cost consultant person. I spent so much time learning what was going on, how to use it, and ways that we could make it better. But just looking at the first line here, I see where the CFO's office is being allocated 80% to the city, 20% to the parish, and that's a code number 1. I flip up, look at the bottom of that page, and code number 1 is based on budgeted expenses. And then if I want to see what the dollar amount is, then that shows you what the dollar amount is there. $480,000 to the city, $120,000 to the parish. That's
And budgeted expenses, like how do you define that?
So budgeted expenses would be taking the expenses of LUS, what goes to the city. That would be LUS is just the city, transit is just the city, police is just the city, fire. All those are major departments that they're all city. We don't do public safety outside of the city of Lafayette. For the police department, that's the sheriff. It's not funded by us. The fire department, there's some shared services in the fire department, but 90% of that fire, that's city firemen. They're not parish firemen. Utilities, water, sewer, electricity, water, wastewater, electricity, that's all city functions. And those are major services offered to city residents that's not offered. So when you put all that together, you look at the number of employees in the utilities department. The utilities department has 447 employees that are working 24 hours a day. Fire department, 285. Police, 344. So we have over 1,000 employees that work shift work compared to employees out in the unincorporated area, library, drainage, health unit, those things. That's not a lot of people. So more of the hours spent is being spent, if you track it by man hours, it's all that's being spent in the city than what's being spent out in the parish.
By the administration. This is separate from all the employees' salaries. That's different line items. This is just the time spent in the mayor's office, the administration.
Well, and let's say finance department. Mm-hmm. So we are handling all the transactions that these folks do. So if I'm handling, if half of the transactions are by the utilities department, then half of finance's work is utilities related. Mm-hmm. Because we're paying bills for utilities, we're paying bills for fiber, if all that we're doing is for utilities, then half of that's already city work. So what's left? Well, we have around-the-clock police protection, around-the-clock fire protection. Mm-hmm. Those are also city functions. So what is the payroll office doing? Most of their time is being spent paying these around-the-clock employees. So that's kind of the theory. Now, there could be another measure that's perfectly acceptable. I'm just explaining the theory behind the measure used.
I just was curious because from 1996, that wasn't the case. It's changed dramatically.
It has.
And so maybe we didn't have around-the-clock fire or police back then.
I'm sure we did. In 96, it was all new. And remember, over the years, you got more sophisticated computer systems and finance systems and those things. So, and theories changed. I don't know, it appears they did population in 96. I can't tell you whether it was population, but I think it was like 60-40. And maybe that was done just for 4 years and it changed real quickly. I don't really remember.
It went up and down, it looks like. So it's, it's just for me to wrap my head around it. We've got different documents we have. And
so that's the historical perspective. I can't explain why those things happen, but I, too, was very curious in what did this look like over time? How did we get to where we are today? In order to do that, I had to go back and look at the history. Public Works on those charts are going to be a little deceiving because in between 2012 and 2014, we peeled a lot of that out of the City General Fund. So to explain that to you, the City General Fund was really the main operating fund of the government. It still is, but there were a lot of expenses, development and planning in particular, development and planning, drainage, roads and bridges were all being paid from the City General Fund, and then those costs would then be allocated out to the special revenue funds, and the special revenue fund would write a huge chunk to the City General Fund, but when you looked in the drainage fund, you didn't see any salaries. So when somebody said, well, Lori, where's our drainage money go? I see a $4 million check written to the City General Fund, but I don't know what you spent it on. And so that was one of the reasons, along with the changes in the bond rating, the way the rating agencies were rating us, we said, well, let's take those drainage employees and put them in the drainage fund and pay for them from the drainage fund. Everybody pays that millage. As a city taxpayer, I pay that millage. let the drainage people get paid from that fund, and that was done under the Durrell administration, and it was clearly explained in the budget process when it was done, so that way everybody would understand the changes. But today, when you look at the city general fund, you won't see drainage employees, but when you go to the drainage fund, you'll see salaries, O&M expenses, and capital. You'll see that outlined there.
I fear I may have gotten you off track. We have some questions. Are you willing to honor some questions?
I'm willing to help what I can.
Okay.
I'm, you know, not going to. I'm going to try hard not to get political
We're
because
grateful
I'm not
for you.
elected.
I know, and we understand that. Thank you. We've got Mark Pope has a question.
Lori, looking for an example, page 2, cost allocations, little ways down, fire department. I'm going to pull out hazmat, hazardous material. I don't know what other municipalities in Lafayette Parish have a specific hazmat team. I know ours is award-winning and one of the best, I'll go ahead and say, in the Gulf South, because they helped me when I was an employee. So we have on that cost allocation 74% paid by the city of Lafayette. I'm looking at hazmat. I hope I'm not cross-eyed here. 74% paid by the city of Lafayette, 26% paid by the parish. So evidently oil or some other hazardous material could spill in a ditch in the parish. So here's my question. So I understand that 26%. If hazmat were called to the corporate limits of Dusel, corporate limits of Scott, Karen Crow, would they be billed by the Lafayette Fire Department for sending their hazmat team into the city limits of Scott, Karen Crow, Dusel, and so on?
Hazmat is one of the few places where we can actually, and we do actually, go out and bill the offender, but we divide the cost up and pay the bills first, and then we're going to collect from the offender later. So that is related to incidents. If this year, or the prior year when we took the statistics, that was related to the incidents that actually happened.
Okay. So you would bill?
Oh, yeah.
If you had some big spill in the city of Karen Crow, a train derailed, and you had all these hazardous chemicals just pouring on the ground, and you responded and it was a hefty bill, you would bill City of Scott?
No, we're going to bill the offender.
The offender?
The company that did the spill.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, sorry, shouldn't use the name.
Stuart Bro is next.
Lori, thank you for being here. Appreciate all the info. I had a few questions, and I hope you don't mind me going through them because I got a hard end where I got to go. But for the structure of the funds within the government, there's a parish general fund and a city general fund. And I'm asking this, so correct me if I misstate this, but the city general fund is kind of like the checking account, and the parish puts its allocations towards consolidation into that city general fund. Is that generally, I mean, is that generally correct?
Yeah, the parish will, based on these calculations, will bill the parish 1/12 every month. We'll take from the parish general fund and move it over into the city general fund based on the adopted budget approved by both councils.
And I bring that up more for something that the committee needs to consider going forward, because there was some issues about the budgeting process and whether the city council had control over certain appropriations or whether the parish council got to vote as well. And I believe that one of the issues is the fact that you kind of have this commingled fund, which then gives the parish council the opportunity to vote, even though it may be majority city or overwhelmingly city or only city. So I just wanted to flag that as something for future discussion. Also, the city maintains a 20% reserve each year for its general fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, you should ignore that. Don't. Years ago, before the rating agencies really started changing, that was a goal that we set. I think that, we've got way over that now. So you can see when I came to Lafayette Consolidated Government, if you don't think somebody's looking out for the city's bottom line, there were 15 days of operating revenue in the city general fund, 15 days. I didn't understand the way the budget was presented, and I've done this for many years. So we made some changes. There were also some changes in state law, but every year that fund balance has gone up, and now, my boss says it's a little too high, so he planned some one-time expenditures from that, which is great. So the city general fund balance has constantly grown. I really would recommend a lot more than that 20% today, knowing what we know today. Being experienced from Hurricane Katrina, because I was in that area for Katrina, I know that we need more than 20% in our fund balance. Now we have a pandemic. So, we're learning all these things where I think you probably need 30 to 40 million in your city general fund based on our size.
And the parish used to carry a 10% fund balance, but now it carries essentially no reserve.
Yeah, we were lucky, though, that sales taxes didn't hit us as bad. So the parish general fund is going to be, a bit larger than what we projected in the budgets, because sales taxes, the pandemic didn't affect our sales taxes like we projected that they would. It's primarily due to internet sales, so we can thank the World Wide Web. But the parish general fund doesn't have a reserve fund policy. They also don't have sales tax bonds outstanding. So in the rating agency world, it's not as important as it is on the city side. On the city side, it's very important that we can show we have liquidity and money in the bank account. The rating analysts used to not look at the general fund. They used to just look at your sales tax charts. Now they really concentrate on the general fund, so we do pay more attention to that now.
So I think it was at the change of the Durrell to Robideau administration, so that was done away with. Is that, my understanding, and again, correct if I'm wrong, is that was done simply because there wasn't enough to maintain a fund balance. If you were going to maintain a 10% fund balance, you'd have to cut services.
There wasn't, but you also have to look on the back end as why are we maintaining that fund balance? On the parish general fund side, back in other governments, maybe closer in the New Orleans area, your parish general fund may have tended to emergencies like hurricane responses to stuff like that, where on the parish side, our public works expenses aren't done out of the general fund. Our public works expenses are done from the roads and drainage, the roads fund and the drainage fund. So what type of emergency are we going to have in the parish general fund that we have to respond to for the district attorney? Probably not a lot. So I think just looking overall, they balanced out what was more important and put a lot more effort in maintaining our city rating, our city bond rating, than the parish.
Okay. In his budget message in 2014 fiscal year, Joey Durrell wrote that the millions of dollars that have leaked into parish government have caused the city to build less infrastructure, hire fewer firemen, policemen, public works employees, as well as other personnel needed to provide for the needs of our community. Unfortunately, now that we've stopped most of the leaking, the parish government will have to deal with this reality. Is that a statement that you agree with, that the millions of dollars had been spent in parish government with city funds at this time?
I think that's more of a political opinion, a political stance that you take. I did find the street lights, but that wasn't millions of dollars. We're talking 25,000. And maybe that was just 1 year. Who knows? I didn't go back and dwell on what happened before I wasn't here. I just corrected what I found and moved on. So I would say that's probably more political.
No, and I understand that.
I can't put my finger on millions of dollars, if that's what you're asking. It's not.
And I totally understand the complexity of your job and having two bodies that you're trying to synthesize everything and make sure that the books balance, and I don't begrudge you anything. So I do appreciate you being here. I guess the next question. I think Mr. Como kind of touched on this, but that there is quite a bit of subjectivity in how cost allocation is determined. And you see that in that you can go from 60-40 to 83-17 to 54-46 to 80-20. And I assume that in each of these cases, the cost allocation consultants are saying that that's kosher.
So, yeah, and it's kind of hard to think, well, how could you go from population one year to undedicated tax revenue another year at the flip of the switch? We go to them and ask them, is this a measure I could use for dividing the cost of the council's office? And the cost consultants will look at it, and if it fits within their principles, then they're going to say yes. And there's seems to be a broader range, like for Veronica's office, than what there was for my office, because of the functions of my office. We're paying bills, we're collecting revenue. So of course, more of those costs are going to be allocated to the guy who's got the money, right? But for somebody more subjective, Veronica's office, the mayor president's office, they took population as a legitimate, and they took available undedicated revenues as a legitimate method. They probably wouldn't take traffic signals for either one of those offices, right? So that's where they come in. I'm just going to support my boss and not letting him bring some crazy measurement in the budget that doesn't make any sense, because then I've got to sit there and explain it. But if it's an acceptable cost measurement, cost principle, then we'll use it. And I don't like when we use, I mentioned that the other day, another cost measure that the consultants use for various things is level of effort, and I really just hate that. So that's going out to a director and saying, how much time do you spend in the unincorporated areas? And I just don't know that somebody really is tracking that much time, or how many employees do you think work in the unincorporated parks? Well, that was the only way to do parks until the city council split it out this past year. But those were kind of, I just didn't like those, but that was lack of any better method.
Okay, if you'll indulge me, I've some. These are handouts that I'm for the group that we're not going to talk about all this. This is largely for just y'all's edification, but it is because I think that there was this was when the discussion really started to happen about the allocation and. Issue with Joey Durrell in, I guess, 2012, and through the end of his term. And can we get Lori? Because what I want to ask Lori is, there's something different about these allocation tables in that at the end of each, there is an item that refers to coverage of parish debt. And I was wondering if you could walk us through what was going on there. These are the cost allocation schedules for 2012, 13, 2013, 14, and 2014, 15, 2015, 16.
So this was under the Durrell administration. This was when probably maybe the first year that he did those blanket changes. The change by doing a lot of these by population was an acceptable method by the cost consultant, but the amount of money that would have been charged to parish government was too high based on these calculations. This may have been before we took out Public Works also. Let's see. No, it looks like we did take out Public Works. This might have been the year we took out a lot of the Public Works Department. I left them in the chart. You look on page 51. So you'll see in Public Works down at the bottom, Director's Office. I left them in the chart with the percentages and the zeros there because I wanted to maintain so that people knew how it was being done in the past, even though it wasn't being done this year. So that way, I just didn't want to hide the rows the first year we took them out.
Right.
So to lead somebody to think that we were hiding something. So they're all there with 0 rows, but this does look like when we took Public Works Department out of the calculation. And then the calculation at the bottom was, you know, accountants, we want to make sure everything ties. And if there's a number in there that doesn't fit, you can find that number. So this was a calculation that we were doing to bring us back to the number that was actually allocated versus what would have been allocated if there were enough money to allocate all of these things by population. It is abnormal, but I felt like I had to put it there so that way everything was on the page in black and white. It's not something that you would normally see, and you don't see it today.
But all your credits have to equal debits and all that, right? Is that
This actually, there was no credit or debit. This was just a reconciliation. The Robideau administration came in, and the Robideau administration said, you know, they didn't like this. The mayor-president didn't like this. He wanted allocations methods to be chosen, and whatever it was what they were going to pay, and there wasn't going to be a reconciliation down at the bottom. It really was the only way that I could figure out how to show everything instead of just not putting it there and having an accountant pick it up and ask a question. No. Nobody else is going to understand what it was for, but.
So this is showing, I guess, that once Mayor-President Durrell came in and said, we're not doing the previous we're not doing the previous formula, which was heavily slanted parish to the city over the parish. He said, we're going to do it by population, 54-46. That's going to drain the parish general fund, and they're going to be short $5.65 million. And so we have what's below is a reconciliation of that to say this isn't there's a separate way that this is being compensated for, right?
It actually wasn't being compensated in any way. It wasn't like that the city was making a loan to the parish that they could go book and say, you owe,
right.
Here's an IOU.
Right.
But, you know, if you could have done that, that's what that would have been.
Okay. So then, if it's not an IOU, I mean, then what is it? I mean, it obviously is not an IOU, but if it's not, was this 6.1 and 1.2, so I guess public works costs transferred to parish-wide special revenue funds, what does that mean?
I don't even remember. We did this so long ago. I'd have to go back and look at the formulas, but I think what we were looking at is these public works used to all be in the city general fund. So there definitely was a savings to the city general fund by moving that all to the parish special revenue funds. So there definitely was a savings. It was just trying to measure that savings, and the savings could vary based on what allocation method you chose to use.
And is that, so then these costs are now being spent on public works administration, or, I mean, is this?
This is only representative of this 1 year. It's not representative of anything that's being done today.
So.
Or this year, I should say.
So this didn't continue past the Durrell administration?
No.
But so is this line item, the cost transfer to parish-wide special revenue funds, that would no longer be the case?
This was identifying that the city general fund used to pay for 100% of all the public works, And the city used to recoup some money from those special revenue funds. Now those special revenue funds are paying for all of the public works except some minor leftover things.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look at the calculation. I don't know that there's, I'd have to look at the formulas and all, and frankly, that was from 2014. I'm probably not going to go back and spend the time because whatever was done under that administration is not being done today, so it's really not important today.
But when he said that, like, this is from Joey's budget message in 13-14, we have made the city whole by taking 2 parish funds and using them to fund the operations of public works. Is that an accurate, is that what is, we see 2 funds that are being then, 2 funds right here, are those the 2 funds that are being used to fund public works operations?
The roads and bridges and the drainage.
And I guess, does that mean that those funds would not be, there's kind of a detriment to the parish in that as well, and that that money is not being spent on physical roads and bridges, it's being spent on operations.
It's being spent on physical roads and bridges in the unincorporated area and O&M, city and unincorporated wide, where the city is getting its capital money from the city sales tax dollars. So the city is also getting capital. The people handling those maintenance and operations of that capital is getting paid from the parish-wide millage.
I'm going to pretend that I understand all of that.
I get it. It's not easy, and I do this for a living, so.
I guess then, you know, this, again, this is a Protect the City committee with a specific charge, which is to look at the things from the city perspective. And although I appreciate the fact that what we're talking about in terms of allocations makes up a small percentage of the budget overall, you know, I think we're talking, if you take out the police and the fire and those types of things that are just city and whittle it down, you're still talking about, you know, $20 million. And there's a lot that could be done for $20 million, particularly every year when we're scraping for funds to keep the parks, rec centers open and these types of things. So it's not negligible from the political perspective, I guess you could say. And to that end, on the last page of that packet with the tables, allocation tables, this is a breakdown of the cost allocation. If you take out these are, I guess we can call them the more subjective measures, which are where you have the non-dedicated ad valorem sales tax revenue, which I guess we could colloquially refer to as what we can afford, and then estimated percentage of staff time, which I guess is very difficult to quantify. The city of all those funds where you kind of have everything dumped in the bucket is paying $15.7 million to the parish's $3.7 million for almost $20 million total. If you were to just for, I was about to say something in giggles, but just for the sake of doing it, if you were to plug that into what the population is now, city to parish, you would have almost a 10 million, almost an even split, 52 to 48%, 10 million paid by one entity and 9 million by another. Again, I don't think that population is an appropriate way to do everything, but that's just kind of an exercise to show one way of looking at it that has been deemed appropriate, and that would result in over $5.5 million more being paid by the parish, which it definitely can't afford, which, you know, goes to the final thing that I want to talk about, and that is, if you look at the total growth of what the city and the parish, of their general funds and specifically the parish's contribution to the city general fund, in 1997, their contribution was 1.5 million, quickly went up to about 4 million in 1998, has gone kind of up and down for the most part, but remaining between 4 and 5 million, and most recently in 2019, or not most recently, but in 2019 it was 4.39 million. So not a whole lot of growth there, whereas the city general fund has increased from, in 1997 it was 40,535,969, now 104,903,137. If you take out the fire and police, you have 92 million. And so it's hard to escape, and I understand if you don't want to touch this. It's not, perhaps I'm just pontificating, but it's hard to escape the conclusion that the city, what the city is that the parish has increased in what it contributes to the city has increased so negligibly compared to what the city is paying, that the conclusion is inescapable that there has to be the increase by the city of its share. Stated differently, it would seem to be impossible to say that in 2008, when you have a city general fund without fire at 76,650 and a parish contribution to the general fund at 4,440,000, they ended up in 2019 with a city general fund without fire and police at 92 million, and a parish contribution to the city general fund at 4.3 million. You've actually decreased the total contribution by the parish by $100,000, and the total city general fund has gone up by a factor of $20 million. And it just seems, there doesn't seem a way for that to be possible without the city taking on more and more share of parish government.
I'm not really following you, but I'm not sure that something you said really throws me off, that the city general fund without police and fire is 90 million? That can't be right.
I mean, I could be wrong on that.
I think police and fire are like half of the city general fund.
That's 2019. I mean, that may be wrong, but.
So the interesting thing in 2019, we were working, this is before the pandemic, right? The rating agencies look at how much money are you taking out of your checking account at the end of the year. And if you're taking in the city general fund, looking at the city general fund income statement, money coming in, money going out, there's no kind of special accounting provisions that are different than what you do with your own personal checkbook. It's all cash basis. So at the end of the year, the rating agencies want to know, are you spending more money going out than you have coming in? If that's because you had a savings account and you're doing a one-time purchase, you're adding on to your house, the rating agency's okay with that. But if it's to pay your just everyday monthly bills, the rating agencies aren't okay with that. So in 2019, we did across-the-board budget cuts in the city for the city general fund because we knew we were going to the rating agencies and wanted to borrow more money. The end result of that is when we start cutting the city general fund and you tell me I can't fill a job or I can't buy these new computers or buy this software or whatever, then at the end of the day, while you cut my budget, you're reducing the amount that the parish funds through the city parish allocation. So by cutting the city general fund's budget, you benefit the parish general fund just through the allocation process. And another thing that you need to consider, boy, I really, really should keep my mouth shut and not overcomplicate things, but when people, the city parish allocation is how the consolidated government shares the administrative and general costs. We're not sharing public works or any of that anymore. It's just the clerical, the administrative and general expenses. That's how we share it at the beginning of the year. 80-20 basically. 80% by the city, 20 from the parish. Now, I've learned over the years there's many, many ways to look at that. There's ways to look at it, well, the parish isn't paying their share, or the city's getting a discount, or the city is very large, sophisticated with LUS fiber and the fastest internet in the world, so we're going to have all this nice technology, but the unincorporated area is a country parish, not the urban area, the city is, so maybe they're not going to have these sophisticated computer systems. What is the right amount of money should the city pay versus the parish? I mean, that's basically what you've got to try to look at. But at the end of the day, you divide these costs through the city parish allocation, and that's because, in most of this you're paying for because you can't use restricted money to pay for it. But at the end of the year, I can use restricted money and send the library a bill based on the number of paychecks we wrote for the library, based on the number of purchase orders we wrote for the library, and all of those things. And what do I do with that money when I get it from the library? Do I give it to the parish because the library is a parish agency? No. The city general fund got over $500,000 from the library last year, because when the library pays that bill based on state statutes and what the state lets me bill the library, I divide that 80-20. The city gets most of that back. So while you're looking at the amount of cost that we allocate, $20 million, probably $5 million of that is reimbursed from other people. So that number gets even smaller on what's reimbursed in the city, on the city parish allocation, on who shares that burden. Did I throw in a new wrinkle?
I can't say that I understand what you're saying because I'm not an accountant, but and so I get it, and I think my numbers were off. Obviously, just looking through the allocation table for this past year, just looking at the total fire and police department, it would be much less. I think that ultimately the point that I was trying to make stands in that we're looking at and again, my opinion, that we're looking at a roughly stagnant parish contribution to the city general fund over the years, and yet the cost of government continues to, I mean, the cost of government is not going down, it's going up. So with that, and yeah, that may give rise to comments that you have, but I guess with that, I will yield the floor.
Thank you. And Stuart, thank you for sharing these internal memorandums. As complicated as a lot of this is, the words are very simple. And this is from 9 years ago during Joey Durrell's administration. And I wish I had my glasses, but basically the problem is that since 1996, the city has been subsidizing parish work. Here is the ugly truth. When we properly allocate the cost to the parish general fund reserve account is reduced to less than zero. And so all these numbers, whether or not they're right, this is something from 9 years ago, and I'm assuming that this was based on an internal analysis. So I'm grateful we're getting this, layering of information, and I'm grateful for you for being here, because we don't really know where to look for all this. So on that note, we have Roddy Bergeron had a question.
Yeah, I have a few. Ms. Stoops, thank you for coming. I don't know if you know, but I used to work for an accounting firm that did LCG's audits like back in the day, so I used to support the audit teams that would come. I don't envy how funds get transferred around internally in government. Like, I don't envy your position because it's insanely complicated the way it happens, and just not even what's on paper, like what happens, like internal tos and froms, to dos and to froms. So I just want to put that out there. First question. What percentage of the total revenue for LCG, like including property taxes, sales tax, use tax, utilities, bills that people pay, what percentage of that is generated inside the city, like the actual total of LCG's budget, like inside the city limits? Because my estimate, like, I don't know the actual number because I ran through some things, but it was in the 90s, like 90%, like 94%, 95%.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I haven't looked at that in a while.
I'm just curious, 'cause
yeah.
I've never heard it talked about, and we were doing some back of the envelope numbers, and I was like, it seems like 94, but I just want to make sure that.
And even sometimes that gets political, but for
Yeah.
me, it's just really easy. If it was collected and paid in the city, it's in the city. And
Yeah, because I know parish property taxes, even though they generate in the city, go to things outside the city. I was just curious on that total number. All right. So has the city of Lafayette ever spent city tax dollars outside of the city of Lafayette on projects or services and not been properly reimbursed for them? Like, someone asked me that question, and I was like, I have no idea.
it's kind of hard to answer. I don't know that we would know specifics. There are some specifics that we would know. And I don't know any examples offhand, but I could think of one is that you have a lot of islands in the city that are unincorporated. So you got a street sweeper cleaning that street. He's going to go in that island and go all the way through. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you have a road being overlaid. Are you going to stop overlaying that road right when you get to that island, or are you going to overlay through? So there could be some of those that, you know, if somebody had the data and the time, that they could go look through that. But the generic, undeterminable things that, I mean, we just wouldn't know.
Yeah, and no one wants to be a bad neighbor, right? We want to be like, here's the line. We don't want to pave, 5 feet of gravel road, or 5 feet of road outside because it's a hard line. But I understand. People ask me those questions, and I'm like, I've never heard anybody talk about it or whatever, and I didn't have an answer for it.
And it was very interesting. Under the Robideau administration, I was asked to go do some research, and so I looked at the proposition for one sales tax. It said it had to be spent for the city, in the city.
And some are for the benefit of the city.
And then the other one was for the benefit of the city. Mm-hmm. So building a road into the city to bring shoppers in could be a good thing, but building a road out of the city to bring shoppers out is a bad thing. So
yeah. I think Louisiana Avenue was one of the projects the extension was spent outside, but then we ended up annexing it.
Well, and then I don't think we ever did the one out of the city. That was pulled from the budget.
Okay.
I think it was originally put in, or.
Yeah, okay. So we talked about, like, no one's ever sat down and did a study. Would it be worthwhile to do a study to see how, like, some of the employees are spending their time, just to make sure that that's right? Because I think that's where a lot of the friction comes in, because in the charter transition team, they had a statement that stood out to me. It said, finance tried to limit formulas related to estimated employee time because it's subjective, but they're used occasionally. And that stood out from me of, like, hey, like, if we're choosing a formula that's hard to track, we don't have to track it every year, but if we did a study that said, yeah, this number's pretty accurate, I think it would calm some of that.
So what you going to do, send somebody out with a drainage employee to send how they spend their time? Because all of that drainage employee is getting paid by the parish millage. It's not being allocated anymore. So that you don't need to do that. But you might need to send somebody to find all of my employees' time. What's the cost of that, and what's the benefit?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, would a government our size spend this much on finance? Probably so. Maybe they'd spend more on a more sophisticated computer system. So that's why you have to look at the cost benefit. You also have to look at what's reasonable. I hope Veronica doesn't mind. I'll pick on her because she's a perfect example, is that a city our size is going to have a highly educated, certified city council clerk. But would a parish, our parish's side, have that high level of education and experience in their clerk? Probably not, but the parish gets the benefit from Veronica. Yep. So,
All right, and then another thing, I know a while back, and this doesn't have to do with City of Lafayette, but the City of Scott, they brought up something at their city council a while back where they were providing fire services to the unincorporated area. And they didn't want to be bad neighbors, right? They didn't want someone's house burning down because they didn't, they're not paying enough. But how does that work with the city? The city pays 100% of fire protection, correct?
So, well, let's start with the City of Scott.
Yeah.
There is a formula for the fire insurance rebate that we get back from the state of Louisiana. So all the property owners, when you pay your homeowner's insurance, some of that homeowners goes to the state for a fire insurance rebate. And we have to file a population report with the state every year. And in that, we tell them, this is the population for the City of Scott. Oh, but by the way, this is their area. I'm using a LUS term, their area of influence, which is much higher. So their fire insurance rebate is based on that higher. So they do get some compensation for that. And then the parish general fund also gives the City of Scott some money to provide services in the unincorporated area. Might not be enough. It might not be penny for penny, but they do get some money to help offset those costs.
For the City of Lafayette, though, does the parish reimburse enough to cover the fire services that go out to the unincorporated area?
Well, that's probably an area that needs to be looked at. I can't say that the City of Lafayette is getting reimbursed to the same level that the City of Scott is. I don't know that. That is an unknown.
Yeah, and that's not to pick on Scott or anything. I'm just bringing it up because that was fresh. That was something that happened with them, and it's just to make it relevant. I just wanted to be just understand some of this, that even though sometimes the city pays 100%, with services that are used outside the unincorporated area, like city, or maybe even police, if police go outside for some reason. I don't know if they do or not.
They don't do too much outside, but when I say the City of Scott, I'm talking about any of the other other municipalities. They're all the same in that they get some credit from the fire insurance rebate, and do they get reimbursed at a higher level than the City of Lafayette? Probably could be a study.
Yeah, and that's just why I don't want anybody's house to burn down because they're not paying, the fire tax or whatever is not covering it. We don't want that to happen, but just as a point of reference of what the budget says versus what sometimes actually happens, in some instances are different, like fire being one example. It may be the only example, but that's one example that comes up.
It is an unknown.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Toops. I appreciate you.
Mr. Catalan.
Laurie, drainage, roads, and bridges. It's my belief that that is the major cost in the unincorporated areas as far as services is concerned. How is that paid for?
Primarily in drainage, 100% from the parish-wide millage. So as a city taxpayer, you're paying that millage, but you're also paying that same amount in the unincorporated area. So it's a parish-wide millage. To answer your question another way, if we deconsolidated, the city would not have a drainage department. It would be a parish department because it's all paid with that parish-wide millage. The road and bridge millage is the city gets about $2 million in city property taxes for city roads and bridges. The assessor left, but that's about right, right? Yeah, the city, there's about $2 million of city money. About 16% of the funds that pay for roads and bridges comes from city taxpayers. The rest comes from parish-wide, which would include city and all the other municipalities for that matter. That's that one chart he showed you.
How was it paid for before Public Works was split?
The same. Up until around the time I got here under the Durrell administration, the city general fund paid for everything and then would bill back portions, but I don't know that the city general fund really got everything it should have got, but now it's being paid from those other funds. It's not in the city parish allocation.
And it was a wise decision to split that department in order to save revenues?
So it wasn't...
The Public Works Department.
The Public Works Department wasn't split to save revenues. It was split to my understanding of what the current mayor-president did, was to narrow their focus individually on the different areas. And from a non-political standpoint, because I don't like politics, but just from a financial standpoint, I look at our bond funds. We have bond funds that we have to spend on certain projects, and we have a certain amount of time in which we have to spend those funds. That's what I monitor, just from accounting-wise. We are spending those funds more steadily at the pace that we're supposed to now that we have people with a narrower focus. So the guy that's worried about drainage is just worried about drainage. He's not worried about drainage, streets, transit, vehicle maintenance. So from my standpoint, and accountability for our bond funds, it's working well, very well.
In your opinion, do you think that the allocation method will ever be sustainable?
The allocation...
Would that animal exist, do you think, in this situation that we're in now?
As long as you have a consolidated government, you're always going to allocate some cost. You're always going to allocate administrative cost. You know, you're never going to pay somebody to follow me and track me to find out, even if you did pay somebody to track me and find out how much time I'm spending on LUS ILOT, flow of funds, LUS bonds, at some point in time, I'm going to be spending time on payroll. And you can't, so you can say the time I spend on LUS is city, but the time I spend on the payroll accounting system having a problem, is that city or parish? You don't know. It's going to be both. So there's always going to be aspects that are allocated.
But as far as the drainage, roads, and bridges in the incorporated area is concerned?
Drainage, roads, and bridges isn't allocated anymore. Just a little bit is allocated based on engineers. All of that O&M is not being allocated.
Why not?
Because it's being paid for from the parish-wide millage fund. It's not being paid for from the city general fund.
So the city general fund pays zero to maintain those roads, the bridges, and clean out the coolers, put new drainage and...
Parish-wide millage money is paying that. It used to be.
When Public Works was whole.
No, it used to be under the Durrell administration, but Durrell changed it.
That's all I have.
All right. Let's see. Bill Leindecker.
Thank you for being here. And I know Mr. Pope said that he sent you my questions to kind of give you a heads up.
I got questions. I don't know which ones were yours versus anyone else's.
Gotcha. Okay.
Unless they were all yours?
They were either mine or they were, multiple people that have asked me in the last 3 weeks or since they learned that I was on the committee, just to try to find some answers. So one question that comes up quite often is the idea that City of Lafayette residents pay twice into consolidated government, okay? In other words, they pay, Youngsville will pay parish, property, and sales tax. City of Lafayette residents do the same, correct? Okay, and then some of that money funnels into LCG, correct?
All city tax money comes to LCG.
Okay. So when I buy, if someone in Broussard buys something in Broussard, sales tax, that money stays there. If I buy something in Lafayette, that money is in Lafayette's sales tax, but it goes to LCG in some way, shape, or form.
Goes to city general fund.
Okay.
And the city CIP fund.
Okay. So what this person wants to know is a person in the city of Lafayette doesn't pay twice into LCG.
LCG has no revenues.
Okay. Okay. Pays into a fund that operates some type of consolidated government function.
It goes into the city general fund.
Okay. All right. Does any of the Broussard City General Fund, does it stay there?
We don't get any money from Broussard.
Okay. When you use the term "we," do we get any money from the City of Lafayette General Fund?
The City of Lafayette General Fund collects the city taxes.
Okay. And it just stays, so the city of, when you buy something in the City of Lafayette, that money is only used for city functions?
It's used in the city general fund and the way it's appropriated by the council.
Okay, all right. Someone asked me to confirm the statement that the City of Lafayette owns the vehicles that LCG uses. Because I don't see a City of Lafayette vehicle riding around. I see Lafayette Consolidated Government.
But if you got me a vehicle number, I can tell you who paid for it.
Okay, so
And track who paid for it. So I did look at vehicles. City bought them all. City police, city fire. That's all city functions.
Okay.
LUS, the city bought them all. I ran a report on heavy equipment. I forgot what they called it. It was coded as auxiliary equipment. I ran from November 1st, 2018 through February of 2021, looking at the auxiliary equipment, the type of stuff that's shared in the primarily public works. Because when I ran it for everything, you got all this LUS, all this fire and police stuff. So I said, let me just look at public works. The parish-wide taxes, parish-wide road tax, parish-wide drainage tax, bought over $1 million in heavy equipment, and so did the city CIP fund. As a matter of fact, the parish-wide taxes bought maybe $50,000 more, and that equipment is used by both.
Okay, all right. So I guess what this person is asking is, it's acceptable for something that was purchased by the parish to be used in the city. Is it acceptable for something that was purchased by the city to be used outside the city?
They will use that. I'm sure they'll use that heavy equipment both in and out of the city.
Okay, and is there any type of reimbursement for the City of Lafayette once the city purchased equipment goes somewhere outside the city limits?
There is no geofencing or GPS tracking on reimbursing any of that, but all of the O&M is shared by both. Or in the case of Public Works, it's really not. In the case of Public Works, all the O&M is paid from the parish-wide millages, the road millage and the drainage millage. So all the fuel, whether that equipment is being used in the city or out of the city, those dump trucks bought by drainage, all the fuel for that is being paid for by the parish-wide drainage millage.
Right, and I guess in your opinion, there wouldn't be any benefit to tracking, you know, because I think that's where the crux of the matter is. Not only is it about the money.
So there could be a benefit. You have to look at the cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth the cost of accumulating this data for the end result? And I think that it has been generally accepted that we're a consolidated government and there are those things that you're going to share. But if somebody wanted to consider that, I'm sure there's somebody that will charge you money to go ahead and do that analysis.
Right, and again, I think the benefit, whether it comes out to be financial or not, it might be that the big benefit is that there's transparency and that there's public trust and that people inside the city knows what's happening to their money and people outside, you know, they know what's happening to their money. So I think that, you know, just depends, you know, how you look at it, whether it's just financial or it's about trust and transparency and if these things are actually occurring as people think they are. If I'm correct, the parish and the city are going to be coming into a lot of money, federal money. Yes?
That's what they tell me.
Okay, all right, very good.
I'm waiting for the truck, the 18-wheeler to pull up in the front and just start unloading cash.
40 million for the parish and 30-something for the city, correct? Okay.
That's what we've been told.
Okay. Have there been any discussions on on how that money is going to be restricted or limited? In other words, one of the big issues recently was that, okay, well, the parish council wants to do this, but it needs the permission of the parish council, right? They both have to approve, and if one approves, you know, they both have to approve. Is that correct? On some things?
On some things, but
Okay.
like minor things, like less than 5% of the budget things?
Well, and you know, how much is 5%? I don't know. How much, I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well, I guess the whole world is going to change when we get 40 million and 30-something million, so now 5%'s changed.
Correct.
But I don't see how the city, if the parish is getting $40 million and the parish has to account for it, what is there that the city would have to approve? I don't know, but I suppose that there's something that could come up where they share the cost, and then they both would have to approve it. But if the parish is building a road somewhere, right now, forget that money, because I'm not sure what's happening with that money or where that money's going. If we have a mid-year budget amendment where it's determined that we have leftover money from a parish-wide drainage project and we want to add a new drainage project, it doesn't go to the city council, it just goes to the parish council.
Right. And I guess I was referring to shared because that's where one of the problems came in.
If you were adding an employee to my department because I'm allocated between the city and the parish, even though it's 80-20, if during the middle of the year it's determined that we need to add an employee to my department and I'm a shared person, that would go to both.
Correct, correct. So there are going to be, from what you know at this point, there are going to be those same restrictions and or limitations and or council votes. It's still going to be tied to that money, even though that money is basically, I'm giving it to you.
No, I can't put those words in my mouth today.
Okay.
Because
right.
we really don't know what that money could be used for.
Okay, so hasn't been discussed as a...
Oh, it's been discussed. Everybody's got all kind of great ideas on what they're going to do with that money, but how it's going to be approved through the budgetary process and what actually can be done, that'll determine whether it's got to go to both.
Okay, and then my last question is, I took a look at Open Book, you know, the thing that's online and gives you all the information, and I guess the purpose there is to increase transparency, you know, to make sure that everything is, you know, someone can go in there and see what checks are being paid, how much, this and that and other. Is that correct?
It was requested. What somebody uses it for, I'm not going to
Okay. Well, what's the function of it?
It gives you a list of checks and what fund they were written out of.
Okay. All right. So I went in there and I looked around and you know, I go down the line and then gives me the amount and the date and all that good information. And then at the end, I'll just pick one out. It's legal fees, all right? Well, it might say $15,000 was paid, and it says legal fees, all right? Well, I don't know what the legal fees were for. I don't understand. I don't know, you know, I don't remember if I saw.
So I'm here to talk about city parish allocations,
Correct.
not Open Book.
Correct.
But I can tell you that in the case of attorney-client privilege, there may be some attorney-client privilege stuff related to that description that we're not able to put out there. But you see, you always could see attorney fees. We've always put that on the internet since I've been here. But now you can see actually check numbers and stuff written. If you're interested in any particular check, you can submit, anyone could submit a public information request to see that. And someone, in the case of attorney fees, there probably, most likely, will be something redacted. But if you wanted to see another check, you know, you can always submit a public records request to get information on that transaction.
Okay, and that's what I didn't understand was that if it's supposed to be for public consumption, people to know what the money was spent on, why would someone have to file a public information request? That's what I didn't get.
There are lots of reasons why we don't have further information. I'll give you a good one. I'm very, very concerned about protecting someone's identity. We have first-time home buyers. Their social security number may be in that information string. And there's information like that that we don't want to put out there. It's confidential. We can't disclose that. So if you see that transaction, you can then submit an X for the backup paperwork, and then somebody will put eyes on it and make sure that we're not disclosing any personal or private or confidential information.
Thank you.
Mark Pope.
Thank you. Short and sweet, Lori. You addressed allocation, heavy equipment. Thanks for that. Lion's share paid for by the parish. Reiterate, if you would, please. The question was, quote, the city buys every car, quote, the city owns every car. Yes or no?
No, that's not true.
Just wanted to summarize that. Thank you.
Are they owned by Consolidated Government? The equipment purchased is owned by Lafayette Consolidated Government?
The Consolidated Government has no money.
Okay.
It has
Do
no
they
revenue
don't have
sources.
title? They don't
so
have title?
The title, if you went and looked up the title, it could very well be the Consolidated Government. But if you give me the vehicle number, we can track and find out who paid for it.
So at the end of the day, it'd be easier to track that. I just was curious about
It
title
is.
from
Yeah,
a
we can
legal
actually.
perspective.
We can tell you who bought and purchased a building. I know my friends in Baton Rouge find that amazing because their Consolidated Government, they can't tell you who owns that building, but we can.
At the end of the day, both councils have to vote on the budget. I know you're saying there can be dickering about the allocations, but at the end of the day, both councils have the right, or the responsibility, I guess, to vote on the budget under the current charter.
Under the current charter, yes, ma'am.
So the city really doesn't have autonomy over the funds because it's still subject to vote by parish council.
It is, but the city very wisely did set some rules in place. Maybe it's a gentleman's guide to how they're going to handle the budget, and they've decided in those rules that the city only would vote and approve the amendments to city functions, and everybody wouldn't vote on them, and they've done that. It might not be ideal, but the way the charter's written, they kind of put a Band-Aid over it, and they've used that this past budget process.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Mr. Lewis?
I'm live now. Yeah, I just want to thank you, Laura, for coming, and also tell Josh, the mayor president, glad he let you come by and have this conversation with the committee. Thank you.
I exceeded my time allowance, but
Yes,
that
you
happens.
did.
So,
This has been a marathon. Thank you so much. All right, let's see. Is there any unfinished business that anybody would like to bring up? Mark, did you want to say something about an email?
Jan? No, I'm up. Okay. So Stuart's gone, and that was my thing. Thought I remembered my whole thing about the city marshal situation being getting part of it wrong. And Stuart and I kind of went back and forth, but I think it illustrates to all the committee members that this stuff is complicated. This stuff is complicated, and Stuart said he doesn't remember, but there was a 2014 state law that outlined who would pay what. And so, in fact, I should have written the statute number down. The city of Lafayette, or the city, for the city marshal who is elected, pays $2,970. The parish, for that same city marshal, this is a monthly fee, $2,970. The parish pays $2,430, $2,430. Now, the city of Lafayette pays for the operation and maintenance, which Laurie has been talking about, of the city marshal's office, $2 million. And it's easy to go, see, there it is right there, and cry foul. Look at how much the city's paying. It's a city function. It's a city function, and there's only a very small part of one precinct. The city of Lafayette is 2 precincts, Precinct 10, Precinct 3, and only a very small part of Precinct 3 goes up into the city of Karen Crow. French colony was annexed. We heard a lot about annexations today. So It's only a small fragment that goes into the city of Karen Crow. So the point is, it's complicated, and that was the only reason for wanting to address that. Sorry, Stuart and I kind of went back and forth and kind of hit the legal tennis ball.
And I looked up that law. That actually outlines what all the municipalities, you know, not just Lafayette. It's a statewide law that began in 1960. It's been amended through the years, just recently amended. So I think it was a matter of semantics, what you guys were disagreeing on. But that isn't just Lafayette paying, the parish paying for city marshals. That's all the parishes in the state. That's a statewide law. Yeah. And different people pay different things. So I thought that was interesting, though.
Yeah, we got a lot to learn. Thank you.
Mr. Catalan, let's see.
Madam Chairman, because of the complexity of this matter, I would like to request from the group and yourself that we set a separate meeting sometime next week before our regular scheduled meetings to set parameters on what the financial committee will work within. We're at the city marshal's office, city court, we don't belong there. That's not the scope of our mission. So, with the permission of everyone, let's go home, let's decipher, digest, write questions, and then we all meet as a committee and set parameters for the subcommittee of the Budget and Finance.
I guess, look, I'm going to be cooperative, but I don't quite understand the rationale behind it. The city marshal was on our allocation sheet. And so to fully understand what cost allocation is and how we come at it, a lot of it is the city parish administration, and then they bring in the cost consultant. But the whole thing with the city marshal, my point was simply, and I will say this again next week, Tag, is just to say it's complicated and there's more than one criterion to determine what is the cost allocation. That was my whole point in bringing up the city marshal. But look, I'll go along. I don't know quite what I think we need to allocate. I think we need to lay out what is, and Bill had a good point, what is our role? We need to start looking at those 14 questions, and maybe we're going into one of your agenda items, and that's next agenda items for next meeting. We need to start looking at when do we start answering, we as a committee start answering those questions within that resolution. So maybe we can combine maybe we can combine it into, I would kind of alter what you say, combine it into what is our role going forward? We've been gathering information up till now.
Well, you paraphrasing what I just said, Mark.
Yeah.
We need to set parameters.
Mr. Catalan, you're not coming across. You need to pull down. Okay, thank you.
Paraphrasing what I'm saying, Mark. What I'm saying is that we, as a subcommittee, Budget and Finance, we need parameters which to work within, because we don't have a year, 2 years to submit our report.
6 months or sooner.
So everyone here has heard from the assessor and the head finance lady here with the city of Lafayette. We need to digest that. We need to come up as a group and set parameters that within what will be discussed, what will be decided from the Finance Committee. This is what I'm saying.
And just as an FYI,
we don't need to go off on a tangent here and there. We need to stick,
and that's what I was going to say, as it relates to discussing what's going to be discussed at the next meeting. Like, these are suggestions, and you guys are giving it to the chair, and Mr. Lewis is here. They can look at that. Now, I don't know if it's not to debate what is going to be discussed. The chairman can take it up under advisement and then go from there based on what notes are taken from the meeting. I don't know if there are any other,
Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, well, look, I'm going to, in the spirit of being cooperative, I thought we have enough information to have set a meeting between you, me, and Bill. The question being, how much is coming from the city and coming from the parish, total income. And it's roughly 95.5. If you look at simply sales tax, you're talking about a little over $100 million sales taxes and LUS money in lieu of tax. And then you're talking about roughly $5 million from the parish.
I want to suggest, given the many hours we've been here,
Yeah.
I'm going to take this under advisement. I hear the request, and I want to thank you. We do need to meet next week.
Yeah, good.
We need to look at what we've been given, and then I think we can meet again next week, and we'll come up with the agenda, and it's going to encompass what was requested. But I think to sit here today talking more about dollars, I'm exhausted. And we're not going to get anywhere with this.
Yeah.
You know, we're
Yeah.
just not.
Yeah.
So, but I do take it under advisement. I know we've had someone here, and I want to, we don't need to pass a motion on that? Can we just follow up? We'll just have a meeting.
just follow
Next
up,
week, we'll look at
correct.
Mr. Lewis's schedule and run some possible times by you guys, so we can make sure we have a quorum.
right, and
So I'm
keep in
hoping-
mind, it probably won't be Tuesday, because we got a council
Right.
meeting. We have council meetings on Tuesdays.
Right.
On off Tuesdays, off Tuesdays.
Are there any other comments on unfinished business, or may we move on? Is there?
There's no
Oh,
public.
excuse me, I'm sorry. Bill, excuse me.
Nope. Okay, thank you very much. I think that this committee is a good cross-section of the community. I think that we represent, the city of Lafayette in a very good way. And I'm just wondering, since the word complexity always seems to come up, it's complex, it's hard to understand, it's this, it's that, okay? Would it be any simpler if Lafayette had its own mayor, if Lafayette had its own city council, free and unencumbered of any kind of restrictions? I don't know the answer to that question, okay? But to me, it would be a lot easier dealing with something that's finite and something that I can understand, having a mayor to go to ask this particular question, instead of having, all these people come in at one time and giving, numbers and opinions and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Is the complexity going to decrease if we protect the city and we get a mayor, we get a city council that's fully functional? Thank you.
Mr. Padalon, did you have anything else? You're done, okay. All right.
There are no public comment
Okay.
speakers. And one more thing, Otis Marino, which is Assistant City Parish Attorneys, on their own, they provided you guys with each a copy of a miniature size, a pocket-sized actual charter. So I'll be giving that
Thank
to
you. Thank you. I think we need a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion, Madam Chairman.
A
All
third.
in favor? Yes. Thank you all. Oh, boy.
Ms. Swift, did you take a roll call? All in favor?
Oh, all in favor, yes. Do we need to do the roll call?
Yeah, because there's a motion on the floor, so there was no actual roll
Oh, okay.
call. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
You might need to do some sitting or some standing chairs, like come to upgrade the, like just every other Tuesday, just upgrade the